These last few months during the fall, we've really been put to the test with disasters and with unexpected, catastrophes, the sort of stuff you prep for. And here's how we did. We had two back-to-back wildfires, the LNU lightning complex and the glass fire, each one of them ending up being about 1.5 miles from the house, one to the east and one to the south. The first one, we had my cousin staying with us. We were on evacuation warning at our house, but they were on evacuation orders, and they came to us with just suitcases and no idea if their home was going to be intact when they went back. So what I realized is during the months of the coronavirus that Eddie and I had kind of slacked off insofar as having food for guests and being prepared. You know, it'd been a hot summer. We're kind of just eating whatever, whenever. And when you have people over, you need to feed them. They were awesome. They, went to the grocery store and took us out to dinner, and that was not the issue. But I realized that, from time to time, people are going to appear at the doorstep, and I really need to be better prepared. So one of the things I did once that the dust settled on that and the fire was over, they were able to go home, is I stocked my freezer not only with like little things, but with meals for 4-5 people, like lasagnas and some pizzas, just stuff like that. Even if it's not a disaster, if somebody comes over, we'll be ready. The second fire was the glass fire, and that was about 5 weeks after the first fire. We were on evacuation warning, and what that means is you have to have all your stuff in the car and be ready to go, your paperwork, your clothing, whatever you think you're going to need. And Eddie was gone for part of that. I had to take him to the airport, and the main road out of the area we live in was completely closed off. Again, the fire ended up being about 1.5 miles from where we were, behind a ridge, and the highway was just had to be closed off for everyone's safety. And what I realized from that, taking Eddie to the airport took 2 hours instead of 45 minutes. And it was through this canyon, it was crazy. And what I realized is that in evacuation warnings, some of the stuff you need to have in your car is stuff that will help you spend the night in an evacuation center in a parking lot, because even though we had a place to go, we might not have been able to get there, or it might have taken a long time to get there. So if we had to evacuate, we might have spent, the night in the evacuation center, then headed out the next morning. So I'm really starting to think in terms of what sort of things I could throw into a picnic cooler or whatever, so we'd have some food and we'd have, some pillows and blankets and stuff like that if we did have to spend the night someplace. Eddie came back from his trip away, and about an hour before he got home, I turned on the water faucet and there was no water. And it's like 9 o'clock at night, and our water is gravity fed from a mountain spring. It's wonderful water, but I don't know what the matter was. I called our neighbor, and who also uses the same tank, and he was out of town. So fortunately, Eddie came back, about an hour after that, and I went up with him to the tank, and he showed me how to adjust it if the valve gets turned off or slowed down or whatever. So that was the first thing I learned, is that some of these basic utilities, I also need to know how to activate them, not just Eddie. Plus, another thing that I realized within 30 seconds of realizing there was no water in the faucet, I remembered how much I like taking showers, and I had enough water for brushing my teeth and stuff like that, but baby wipes do not cut it when you're dirty at the end of the day. So as part of my prepping or whatever, I want to make sure that I have, multiple gallons of water just for cleaning up and stuff like that. I did have paper plates on hand and that, and I don't really like using paper plates, but it was handy because I could use those and throw them out, and I didn't have a pile of dirty dishes in the sink waiting for the water to refill, and indeed by the next morning we did have water. But it was kind of a wake-up call as to what happens when you don't have water. So we had the 2 fires, and in order to avoid a 3rd fire, our utility company decided to turn off the electricity for a couple days. Now, this was no big deal. The year before, they had 2 5-day turnoffs. One of them was the entire region, and that's a whole story in itself. But this was just several regions, ours included. And they use a formula that is like humidity, wind, temperature, vegetation, and then they'll turn off the electricity. So if something happens to the lines, it does not affect us. Or at least it's less likely to cause a fire, even though huge fire we went through last year was caused by the lines that had been turned off. Some had not been turned off, but again, that's a whole other story. We did okay. We had our generator, because we'd done this last year a couple, and we had the generator going. I had ordered a gas burner from Amazon, which there was some manufacturer's defect, so I couldn't use it. But we did okay. The freezer and refrigerator, we were able to move the generator around between those things, and everything stayed pretty cold. One thing that was a problem was that I really didn't plan out real well what I would cook if you can only use a stovetop or a frying pan or a burner or whatever. I really hadn't thought that one through. So when I went back to go grocery shopping the next time, I have put some things aside, which would be good if I don't have access to an oven and I just have to cook stuff quickly on on a burner. Now, when we don't have electricity, we don't have internet or phone either. So once a day, Eddie would plug the generator into the satellite stuff here, and in the middle of the blackout, he realized he got a message from a contact tracer, a coronavirus contact tracer. Of course, we had to wait till the next day to find out what it was, because it was in another state and it was already, whoever called, it was already closed. So he called the next day and found out that on the plane ride home, he had been exposed within 6 feet of someone who had the coronavirus. Now, Eddie wore a huge mask, and I was confident he didn't have it, but still, we ended up with the generator doing the satellite thing. We ended up calling and making appointments to get both of us to get tested. It had been a little over 2 weeks at that point, but just to be on the safe side. And the next day we were able to go in and get tested, and then we found out we were negative. The deal was, though, until I knew we were negative, we didn't want to leave the house, and that includes grocery shopping, nothing. And I had plenty of food, but I hadn't bought a lot of fresh produce because I knew we were going to go into a blackout, and I thought I'll just get all that stuff afterwards, because the refrigerator, I don't want to have a lot of stuff in the refrigerator that might go bad if something happens to the generator. So I didn't have a lot of vegetables or fruit. I mean, I had enough for a day or two. And I thought, if we're going to be here for 2 or 3 days or 2 weeks, it's going to be very difficult. So what I did do is I restocked. When I restocked my freezer and refrigerator, I did make sure I had frozen items and some canned items and even dehydrated items. So those are my stories, disaster stories from the fall. Fortunately, nothing bad happened. We were okay. Our house was okay. My cousin's house was okay. Our neighbors were okay. God bless those who lost their homes. It's been pretty horrible with the fires and with the coronavirus, and all the things we went through were nothing compared to what others have gone through. However, each time it was a wake-up call to what we need to do to make sure our pantry and our preparations are adequate, because each set of circumstances had a different set of variables. And, we're now plugging the holes in that. I don't think you can completely plug the holes in anything, but I'm certainly going to give it my best shot based on our experiences. Anyway, I hope none of you have to go through any of this, but it's always good to be prepared, always. Thank you so much for watching.